So the Law Reform Commission has recommended the criminalization of the ukuthwala custom, which involves the abduction of brides, often children. The recommendation was made to Justice Minister Ronald Lamola. So to talk more about this, we're joined now by Nogwaja Zulu, who's a cultural expert from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Leslie Ann Foster, founder and director at Masimanyane Women's Rights International, as well as Mongega Mhlawudi, will be joining us shortly, the author of The Relevance of Ukuthwala in Xhosa Modern Society. I thank you so much to all of you for joining us this morning. But perhaps, Nogwaja, you can just give us historical context into the practice of ukuthwala. You know, when we're speaking about a specific law mandating that it be criminalized, one wonders why is it that in 2022 we're still even having to have this kind of conversation. But maybe bring our audience around just exactly where did this thing come from? Is it an African custom? Has it always been in our society? How did we start seeing the prevalence of ukuthwala even over the years?
Thank you, Leslie. Let me give the historical context. And first of all, let me say that there are three types of traditional or cultural marriages. First is ukuthwala, second is forced marriage, and three is arranged marriage. Let me start with ukuthwala. Ukuthwala was a way between two lovers to marry, where the male would take sort of a forced, in that sense, force the girl to marry him. So these two people were lovers. They were same age. They know each other. But the problem would be that the parents of these two did not give them the consent to marry, or do not want them to marry for various reasons. So they bypass that process. The father of the young man would have no choice but to agree when his wife-to-be is already at his home. That is ukuthwala in its traditional way. I will come back to say what has gone wrong. And forced marriage was almost the same thing, but it was an agreement between two men that their children should marry. Their children would be the same age, they know each other, but they are not lovers. So their parents were forcing their children to marry. And it would go in a way of abducting the girl, and then it goes to the father's to the husband to be placed, and they pay lobola. So in other words, a rich father would consult a person they want to in order to get a wife for their child. So there was a commercial issue there. So he promised to overpay the lobola price. Then in forced marriage, in arranged marriage, which is the third one, was almost the same. You see, there are similar things here. The children involved would not be lovers, but they know each other. The issue is that they would be cousins, relatives. They're cousins that are forced to marry. Let me end there. So they know each other, but they are not lovers, just that they are relatives. Thank you.
All right, Nogwaja, just to give you a little bit of context, you're speaking to Faith. Leslie's part of our panel discussion as well. So it's Leslie Ann as well as Bongega, that you will be a part of the panel with. But Leslie, to bring you into this part of the conversation right now, if we've got the clear definitions around ukuthwala in terms of, you know, historically it was about two people who are of the same age group who then decide to bypass the customs, so as it were, of marriage in terms of its historical context, and therefore now the family has to then almost concede to their marriage, whereas a forced marriage, then it will be that rich family that chooses the wife between the fathers, so that, and the woman does not have a choice. One thing that is quite prevalent in that is that it is all a family kind of decision, and somewhere, somehow, the woman does not have much of a say in it. But how has it maybe even changed over time? You know, as Nokwat was giving the history of it, how has it then changed over time, where you're now finding 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds being, I don't even want to call it, it's kidnapped, you know, for the purpose of being used as wives or being made wives at such young ages. When did we go wrong?
Well, I think we first have to, good morning, everybody, and, you know, thank you for having me on the show. I'm from Masimanyane Women's Rights International, so the issue of ukuthwala falls within the permit of what we work on, which is violence against women. Now, what has changed is that South Africa now is a democratic state. We base the responses to the citizens within the country on democratic values, on social justice, fundamental human rights, and we seek to improve the quality of life of citizens, and this includes children. So firstly, the rights of the children are set out in the Constitution, and this goes all the way up to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So we need to place it within that context, why there is a conversation around ukuthwala. And I think historically, we've heard what, you know, the different forms of ukuthwala have been. What we are seeing now is that the custom has been appropriated, and that it no longer looks at protecting the rights of the child. Now, when we talk about children, we mean people that are unable, haven't yet acquired the ability to make decisions for themselves. So it is incumbent upon families and upon the state to actually provide that protection. I also want to debunk a myth that this is an African custom. I've just yesterday returned from Turkey, where we had a consultation in the Middle East and North African region, and we discovered that the practice is very widely carried out in that region as well. So we have an issue where the rights of children are being violated, one by forced marriage at an early age, and with ukuthwala, it's the abduction and force of girls into marriage. And what happens is that we interrupt their schooling. They are unable to get a proper education. Their young bodies are subjected to acts of rape, because that's what it is when you are underage, and also forced to have children. So this is why the state, families and communities are called upon to protect the rights of the children and not to engage in this. Now, culture has a place in our society. It has a place in which it gives us a framework for treating one another with respect and upholding the dignity of people. When it comes to children, it's a different thing, because they have a particular vulnerability and a particular risk. And what we are talking about is how do we protect children and that risk? And I mean, our courts have been clear, the Constitution is clear, that when such a practice comes into play, it is a violation of that child's rights. And what's happening in our society now, that it has also become transactional. So where you have deepened levels of poverty, children are now commodified, they're exchanged for money or for goods. And that completely violates their rights. So there's a whole continuum of violence that's happening, a violation of the rights of the child, and then also what it happens is it deepens poverty and inequality in our society. What we're trying desperately to do in our country is to improve the status of women and girl children, and that's the struggle that we have right now.
And I want want to pick up from what you're just saying, Leslie, around even the point that you're making on culture. And Bongega, to bring you into this one, do we sometimes hide these practices which are, if you have to look at it, and just to be very blunt, it's child abuse, right? If you're going to kidnap a child and the child is going to be used for sex at the time that before the body is actually matured, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old married by somebody who is much older for whatever reason, that's an abuse of that child. Do we sometimes hide behind culture? And have we allowed a society for culture to be the premise or the stone upon which we fall in saying that the reason why this custom has continued to happen over the time is because it's our culture? What role does culture actually play in being able to either condone or even condemn these kinds of practices?
Well, I think that, you know, as a country, there's been quite...
Leslie, I'm just going to give Bongega an opportunity to respond to that. I just do understand that I think we've got a bit of a delay with you, Bongega, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Good morning to you and viewers at home. Okay, first of all, cultures, they do change as the time goes by. So now, this cultural practice, I think, has no value now nowadays in the modern society where we have the constitutional laws that protects everyone, including children and women. So in this case now, what these people are doing, they are also misusing this cultural practice for their own benefit, and then while claiming to be following cultural practices, which I would say it really has no place in nowadays, because this is an old cultural practice, if you must know.
Yeah.
There was practice in the past, and nowadays people have changed, and we also do things differently. But then we still find individuals who are proud to say that they are following this cultural practice, while they're doing a lot of things also wrongly. Like in this case, for example, you'll find in many of these cases that have been reported to the media, the children have been abused, like where the kids have been raped, they've dropped out of school, they've been assaulted, of which if you go back and check the cultural practice, you find that there are some of the things, like some of the procedures that have not been followed properly. These young men, they just going around committing criminal acts, hiding behind this cultural practice, of which that is wrong. This is what we say. This is why we're saying it is wrong. And also now the times have changed, so we should change with times also.
Yeah, but again, and I want your take on this one, Nokwach, as well, around the role that that culture, by even saying culture in inverted commas, would play in being able to allow for these practices to happen for so long. In modern society, in democratic society, and to Leslie's point that this is not a South African phenomena, right? It actually happens in other countries as well, in other communities as well. But it's been happening for far too long, where young girls are actually taken and are made wives. It's child brides, if you have to be very specific about it. It's child brides. Do we hide behind the culture and what is expected from culture to condone such practices? And why have we done it for so long? Why do we allow for 12-year-olds to be seen as brides or 13-year-olds to be seen as women? Are we not a society that sees a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old as a child? Nokwacha?
Yes, thank you. Let me explain what has gone wrong. First of all, now, the majority of these cases are between children, underage children, and men who are in the age of 40 to 50. So it is a bit embarrassing, and these men have children almost older than these so-called wives, which is a problem. So it is no longer an issue of culture. So it has broken away with culture.
Just to interject there on what you were saying, Nokwacha, that it's no longer an issue of culture. If it's no longer an issue of culture, can we say that it's now an issue of perversion or pedophilia? Because it does, again, it goes back to my point, and you'll be able to expand this more than anything else. I don't understand, as a woman sitting and having this conversation with you, why is it that a man will find a 12-year-old attractive? To be honest, I don't understand where the premise of it comes from. So you're saying it's no longer culture, then what is it? Is it pedophilia? Is it perversion? What is it that makes a 40-year-old see a 12-year-old as attractive?
It may be both of those and more, because that man also would be married. So the child is forced in a very strange polygamous relationship. So it is wrong. Yes, it is sexual abuse in another form. It is also exploitation of the poor, because it happens with the poor families in most instances, where a particular man with these strange sexual issues would approach a family, a poor family, and ask them to give them their child. And what is often paid that family is not what amounts to a respectable lobola. It is a cheap issue of about 2 or 3 cattle, or some cattle in a form of money. So that is exploitation. But the main issue, I think it has come out, this culture, I mean, it is hiding behind culture. The people who are doing these things are hiding behind culture. So it is no longer what was happening as a right thing. So it is wrong. It is against the present Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, which gives children certain rights. And you can also read these children's rights in the South African Children Act 38 of 2005, which has been amended several times. The latest 2 amendments is 2016 and 2017, where it says exactly that a child is somebody who is under 18 years. So these transactions and these marriages that involve a child that is below 18 years are criminal cases.
Yeah, no, Coach, I'm going to pause you there, and we're going to come back and we're going to expand a little bit about exactly what role can us as society, civil society, play in being able to prevent this from happening. And we're also going to get just insights around then what do we do in this instance if you're finding that the prevalence of ukuthwala still continues, where you're finding a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old being taken by somebody who's 40, who's 50 to be made their bride, so as it were. What can that child do to actually say no? That conversation is going to continue with our panel discussion as we try to unpack really some of these cultural practices that are happening in and around our world, where we don't even necessarily from time to time cast a spotlight on. And we're attempting to cast this very same spotlight this morning. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with our panel discussion and just go deeper into the subject matter around what do we do as a civil society in that regard. Stay with us.